Okay, we're going to start the video.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for the AAF Omaha Professional Development Program, the State of Social Media. We've invited a panel of thought leaders and social media professionals to join us today. We want all attendees to feel free to voice questions through the Q&A function during this webinar. I'm Jenny Allenbaugh, the Director of Media Services at Anderson Partners, and I serve on the AAF Omaha Board of Directors and co-chair the personal development team with Aaron Berman, co-owner of Full Branding. So grab your lunch and we'll get started with today's discussion. AAF Omaha has been offering professional development programs and webinars, thought leaders, and fun activities for our members virtually throughout the pandemic. We've learned a lot along the way and we'll continue to offer virtual programming in the coming months. We hope to be back in person with live events early this fall. AAF Omaha is a unifying voice for advertising throughout Nebraska. Next month, the two local Nebraska chapters of the American Advertising Federation will merge to become AAF Nebraska. If you are not currently an AAF member, now is an exciting time to join our membership. AAF offers an organization to educate, inspire, and bring an inclusive sense of community to advertising professionals in our area so that we, the future generations, can continue to do the work we love. For more than 15 months, we have been offering events like today's professional development programming free to our members as a membership benefit. As like I said before, we will be open for Q&A toward the end of the discussion, so feel free to use the Q&A function with your questions during the discussion. I am today's panel moderator. And as I mentioned, I'm the Director of Media Service at Anderson Partners, and we are a full service advertising agency and marketing communications firm. Now on to our panel discussion. Social media is a fast-paced, ever-changing, ever-growing part of the marketer's tool belt. But with conflicting advice on best practices, social struggles, branding, and more, how do we successfully use these tools? How do you know if it's working and when it's working? What's the best way to market on social media? Are you sharing your blogs and using influencers? Today's panel of experts are here to answer many of your questions as possible. The AAF Omaha team assembled today's panel with industry professionals that are going to share with us how to tackle social media with some of best practices and advice. With us today, we have Brianna Olson. Brianna has spent her career working on brands such as Subi Honey, the Nebraska Lottery, Boys Town, Highland Dairy, Phillips 66, and Kindle Motor Oil. Today, she is planning the strategy and coordinating the implementation of social media campaigns for both Fusion Medical Staffing and their new platform, Fusion Marketplace. Christy Doe, as a social media strategist at Bozell, Christy creates social media content strategies, provides training, coordinates social settings, and works with influencers. Before joining Bozell in 2020, Christy worked at Disney and previously did marketing for the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services and Raising Cane's. Randa Zalman, after 20 successful years as a marketing professional, agency principal, and entrepreneur, Randa transitioned to higher education. She currently serves as an assistant professor of marketing strategy and MBA programs at Bellevue University. Randa is a recognized thought leader on the power and appropriate use of new media, including social media and digital placement. Randa has been a featured speaker at seminars and conferences across the globe and has served on multiple boards of directors for industry organizations. Stacy Winter. Stacy is the creator of the Omaha Food Lovers Facebook group. He created the group in August of 2019 to share his passion for food and to create a local foodie community where people feel welcome to respectfully discuss all things food. Prior to the pandemic, the group had just over 16,000 members, and a little over a year later, it had grown to 62,000 members, along with 11 moderators. The group has provided an amazing way for members to learn about new places in and around Omaha, and has given restaurants a great place to advertise their offerings for free and interact with their customers. Abbie Cuenca is an Associate Connections Director at VMLY&R in Kansas City, a global brand and customer experience agency. Abbie specializes in guiding social media strategies for brands in a variety of industries, ranging from technology to food and beverage. She assists client partners at every step of the marketing planning process, providing guidance in creative ideation, platform-based best practices, and connecting with social media audiences. Thank each of you for joining us today, and let's get right into it. Abbie, we'll start with you. We know there are many social platforms out there, and the list continues to grow. How do you decide what platform is right for your clients, and how do you measure success?
Well, I think that's a great question. Thanks, Jenny. And, I think the process really has to start with your client. So thinking through, who's this client's target audience? What platforms are they currently activating on? What works for a B2B, very leads focused client, perhaps LinkedIn, might not be the right fit for a client that's really looking to hit the zeitgeist with something like TikTok. Another thing we find really useful when we're working with clients trying to architect a platform strategy is, what are your competitors doing? And not just knowing what your competitors are doing, but saying, are there any spaces or themes that your competitors aren't activating on that you can find something really unique to reach that both your existing audience and your target audience? It's also really important, at the beginning of the channel mapping process, to do a pretty thorough audit of what you're currently doing on social media and being honest with you or your client about what's working and where there are opportunities to grow. And then as far as measurement goes, that's always a really hot topic because we all want to make sure that our efforts are reflecting success. And I think, it's definitely something that I also believe starts at the beginning of any campaign or partnership process when it comes to social, because truly, there's a lot of different, key performance indicators that, you can use to drive your client's success, from, everything from engagement to, kind of building leads and commerce. So I think kind of being very clear about what those key performance indicators are for social at the start helps you craft the right messaging and creative to really meet and hopefully exceed your goals.
Thank you. Christy, how do you think Gen Zers are changing the social media landscape?
Yeah, so I think they're changing it really fast and in a completely different way than we probably would have predicted. Like I have an example. So I do photography like on the side, and one of my seniors, like senior photos, she asked for the photos without any filters on it, like without any editing or anything. And I was like, no, this is crazy. I would never do that for anybody because, as a photographer, you want your photos to look, the same. And she just said that, we don't want any like photos on Instagram to look like it's not us, and we want to be as real as possible, and nobody uses filters anymore. And it was just such like an eye-opening like sentence, and I just couldn't believe it. But it kind of all ties together because right now when we're working with a lot of Gen Zs on Instagram, you can see that it's all about transparency and authenticity now. So people don't want the fluff, they don't want the filters. And I was doing some more research and I saw that, crying selfies are really popular right now among Gen Zs. It's so crazy. You can look it up. You don't believe me, but they are posting like photos and videos of them actually crying because of their mental health and the stress that they're going through. And another trend right now is the under eye trend. So basically they'll basically make their bags under their eyes look even more dark. And it basically shows how exhausted and how overwhelmed they are. And it's like a huge trend on TikTok. It's crazy. But the whole point is that they want people to know that they're real and that it's not like what it was 5 years ago, even, where it was kind of filter heavy and just showing everything that you want people to know. And I think that's super important for brands to really catch on, because it's time to start talking about things that they care about, like mental health and like conservation and things like that. It's no longer the days where you can just, set an audience age and push the ad out. It's more about what it looks like and using the right people to reach the younger audience. So if you really want to reach, Gen Z on Instagram or TikTok, I think it's important to make it look different than the rest of your platforms, right? There's no more like cross promoting or cross posting anymore, and it's just like a completely different animal. So super interesting to learn about.
That is. Thanks for sharing that. Randa, we just talked a little bit about some of the variety of social platforms that are out there. What do you think what is the future of social media, and why? And how do you know if it's time to invest in a platform that may be relatively unproven?
Super great questions. I think the future of social media is really going to be more integration. We're going to see more cross-channel promotion, more adaptive content for people who really want to immerse themselves between the brand and the consumer. So, for example, as Christy was talking about in terms of this authentic, kind of more memorable experience, social is one of those great ways to do that. And so I think the future of social media is going to reflect more of that connection. When you're talking about investing in the different platforms, that has forever kind of been the question about social media, right? Which platform, what's going to be the most effective? And Abbie spoke very well to that earlier. It's really comes down to what's most appropriate for your brand. What does your target audience want? What's going to be most realistic for them? Who's going to hold up the brand philosophy, and what kind of products are going to best be represented on the channel that is selected. So for example, if you're an interior decorator, you have a very visual sort of product, and the people who are going to be buying that product are more likely going to want to see something on a social media channel that can reflect that. So probably like an Instagram. If we're going to be looking at kind of some new platforms like Clubhouse, for example, which is going to be a more audio platform, that may not make as much strategic sense to that particular audience at that time. Now, that's not to say you can't be an early adopter and you can't, experiment, because I think you always should be. Any good social media marketer is going to be a student of the form and of the craft. And so you really want to know what's out there and experiment. But it really comes down to what's right for your brand and your target audience. And most importantly, what can you do well? A lot of brands will try to be all things to all people and experiment in all kinds of platforms. But really, brands should only do the social media platforms that make sense for them and that they have the resources to do exceptionally well.
Very interesting. Brianna, this is a topic that I'm really interested in, about influencers. So how do you choose one? What happens if there's an unflattering exposure? Do you need a crisis management plan? I know there's lots of things that have happened in the past with influencers, so really interested to get your take on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the two different brands that I work on, Fusion Medical Staffing versus Fusion Marketplace, we've got to dabble in two different types of influencers. So with Fusion Medical Staffing, we tend to work with current healthcare travelers that currently travel with us, that are fans, that love what we do here at Fusion. So they share awesome photos. We get to do Instagram lives with them. And then with our new platform, Fusion Marketplace, we get to open it up and we get to work with all different types of healthcare travelers from all different agencies to help promote our new platform. So we've been very lucky. We haven't had any negative backlash from any of our influencers currently, but it's very important to have a crisis management plan in place before that happens. An escalation process of sorts, if you can handle it quickly and accurately in your social team, or if you need to escalate it to HR, sometimes even legal, but having that escalation and crisis plan in place beforehand, as you're creating your social team, as you're growing your social team, will help, if there's any issues, there will be issues. making sure that you don't tarnish your brand or anything like that. But the awesome thing about influencer marketing is there's a lot of different platforms out there you can use to help make how you're vetting your influencers, make that process easier. There's a ton of different platforms, Linkia, Clear, just to name a few, but they help you go in and you can search for influencers based on keywords, based on specialties, based on location. You can communicate with them through that platform, pay them through that platform. So we're definitely getting into those, and it's been really fun to work with these people and show them about our brands and why they should love it and use it.
That's very interesting. Thank you. Stace, now we know that you created and manage a very successful Facebook group. So what goes into managing that? And one of my favorite topics, how do you handle the negative comments?
The group, I mean, it really is treated almost like a business. You know, we've developed a moderator guide. So when I bring on new moderators, that, you know, we're all consistently following the same direction. So there is no question, you know, when things, you know, go awry, you know, what do you do? I think clear, focused group rules is a must. You know, at the end of the day, we try to remember that the group really is a food group and a food community, I guess, if you will. So, you know, when things tend to, as they do in social media, they go astray a bit. You got to bring people back to the real focus of the group. So we do a really good job of trying to, you know, keep people focused and, you know, just on task, if you will. You know, I vet my moderators really, really well. You know, the people that volunteer to be moderators are typically not the people you want as moderators. So I typically, you know, through their interactions within the group, that's how I have found the moderators that are in the group. And so that's done very well so far. Like I said, I think you said earlier, we have 11 total at this point. And we're a really good team. We communicate daily through Messenger, you know, on you know, things that we're seeing in the group and how do you deal with this. So there's a lot of communication that happens behind the scenes that most people don't have any idea is actually occurring. So it is, I think, from that perspective, you know, it's a lot of communication as there is in any business. So that's, I mean, from running it on a daily basis, you know, it's a 24/7 operation. So we're always, you know, trying to answer questions and moderate the group as best as we can. From a negative, you know, comments. So one of our group rules that, you know, we've instituted as far as, you know, within a food group, right, is negative reviews. So we instituted a rule just because we feel that, you know, most restaurants are not purposely going to give you, you know, a bad experience. So our group rules are, you know, if you have basically an overly negative experience, that you first need to address it with the business first, include their response in your review, because that can, you know, that goes a long way to the overall experience. So they, you know, given the chance, a business typically will turn a negative into a positive. So, you know, we faced a bit of backlash because people don't think we allow negative reviews when, you know, we do. We just have rules around, you know, what kind of negative reviews are allowed. So, you know, that's, you know, from negative comments, that's probably, you know, what we see the most. Obviously, if people are mean, you know, we have a really low tolerance for any sort of, you know, back and forth, you know, being aggressive towards other members or poor treatment. You know, we typically results in, you know, a muting of those members for a while, depending upon how bad the situation was, and then eventual blocking of members. So I think we do a good job of, you know, trying to consistently, you know, moderate the group, and you know, making sure people feel like they can express themselves in the group and not be, you know, picked on, basically.
Thank you. Abbie, what do you think goes into a successful managing on each social media platform? And do you have anything else to add about how do you manage the negative comments that would come up?
It's a hot topic and it's never going away. The internet is a wild place. I know all the folks on the panel and probably a lot of the folks in the audience, it has always staggered me. I've worked on a bunch of brands in like food and beverage, and especially it's amazing what the people of the internet will complain about to a brand. And brands are paying attention. And I think, especially from an agency person's perspective, a lot of what strategists have to do is kind of provide some perspective on, that's one comment. So I'll start with the negative piece. I think, a couple of things that are important. I think it's kind of, bracing yourself that whenever you put content out there, you don't have control over how people react to it. So it's important to kind of plan ahead, really vet your creative strategy or your marketing strategy through, what outsiders or your target audience might see. And, sometimes, that means kind of making last minute tweaks, which is really important. Another thing that we like to recommend is creating something like a response plan. So, kind of putting your audience brain on and saying, of course, what are all the rave reviews all this content is going to get, but also what are the potential things that people will flag that of based on what you're listening on the platform with the audience. And I think that kind of creates a sense of, confidence going into a campaign, saying at least we're prepared, and then monitoring in real time and escalating as needed. It's certainly a moving ship, so it's important to kind of prepare ahead of time. As far as managing and kind of deploying social media campaigns, as a journalism major, I never thought I'd be so embedded in Excel sheets in my professional career, but it's really important to kind of outline those roles and responsibilities, whether you are, from my perspective, working in an agency team where there's a lot of people, or you're doing, you are starting out on your own, kind of mapping out, what are the roles that we need to kind of define for each level of the campaign, what can be delegated, what needs to be kind of cadenced out on a timeline. I think, kind of preparing along that route has helped us a lot to make sure that, there's a lot of different elements that go into planning a campaign and deploying it, especially if you're working with multiple assets on multiple platforms. So kind of working ahead of the game to kind of create what we like to call a run of show has been really helpful to make sure no balls get dropped in the process.
Thank you. Randa, what do you feel is the biggest missed opportunity you see for brands in social media?
Gosh, I think the biggest is really just honest to goodness engagement. Social media is the perfect place, the perfect environment for one-to-one, even two-way communication. So this is a really great opportunity for brands to talk to consumers directly and for consumers to talk to brands. And I see a lot of people not taking advantage of that. Ask the questions. I think brands can have, a little bit of a strategic insight into what their target audience is thinking and feeling. What are their interests? What are their behaviors? And what's great about social media is that you can have those conversations that are really raw, really real, really fantastic, really deep, but you can also have the other side of that spectrum too. And you can just ask, hey, what's going on? What's happening in your world? What do we need to know about that we can help not only strengthen this connection, but make sure that we have this truly wonderful relationship between brand and consumer, where it doesn't necessarily feel like an exchange, but it's really more about that relationship. And I think more brands can do a better job about that too. This morning, I was reading an article from Marketing Dive. They interviewed the CMO of Wendy's. I highly recommend everyone go check out that article, because he talks about how social media has really been ears on the ground for them in terms of listening to their consumers, understanding those insights, and then making very big strategic decisions in terms of, will this work, will this not work for them? And it's been a huge game changer for them. So I go back to biggest missed opportunity is talking directly with people, listening, engaging, and asking good questions.
Very true. Christy, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, when you were talking about listening, I totally agree. I think listening is the biggest thing that brands are missing out on. So something that we've been really invested in at Bozell is social listening. And so we've kind of seen like how a lot of brands during the pandemic were canceled, and just because they were super tone deaf with their ads and what they were saying, like KFC had a campaign about finger licking at chicken, and it was just completely wrong during the pandemic, right? Because you can't lick your fingers. So they had to pull that instantly. That's just like one small example, but we've noticed that social listening has really just helped us give our clients like the content ideas that really resonate with their audiences. So for example, like if your client was a bank, there could be so many things that you could talk about, right? You could be talking about savings accounts, loans, mortgages, and there's like endless things. But right now, there's probably one thing that your audience really wants to know about, but how are you supposed to, figure that out? And like Rhonda was saying, you could, talk to them and interact and engage with them, but if they aren't already interacting with you, that's kind of hard. So what we've been doing is searching on our social listening, like looking at Twitter accounts and Reddit and everything. We found that those two are the most raw and honest platforms that people are explaining their needs on. And we've just found it to be super helpful in being able to narrow it down so that you can have your content buckets that make sense with the times right now. So yeah, I think social listening overall is the big thing that brands could really be focusing on this year.
Thank you for that. Brianna, kind of along those same lines, what are some of the common mistakes that you see businesses making with social media?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, how much time do you have? No, just kidding. Definitely playing off of what Randa and Christy said. I mean, besides not engaging enough, not communicating enough with your audience, listening to what they're saying, also the use of hashtags, underusing that. I think that businesses aren't taking the time to test or try new things enough. So leaving some wiggle room in your budget each month to try out Instagram Reels, to try out TikTok. I know it's a scary beast, but taking that time to strategize a campaign, pulling, your correct audiences to test and putting it out there. And it's kind of like throwing pasta at the wall, seeing what sticks. I also think that Pinterest is definitely underutilized. People go to Pinterest to figure out what to make for dinner. They go there to figure out what to wear for a wedding they're going to that weekend. So why not would they go there to see what app they need to use, what product they should be buying? So just meeting your audience where they're at and testing it out and seeing what works. You can always go back and revisit. And if it doesn't work, at least you tried it. And it could be something that could be really good. I also think brands need to keep in mind the 80-20 rule. So making sure that 80% of your content is informational for your audience, what they're wanting to hear about, learn about, and then only 20% of it is actually promoting what it is you have to sell. So those are kind of the main things that I think businesses need to incorporate into their strategies.
That's true. Thank you. Stacy, we know that the Omaha Food Lovers Group contributed to the ability for some of the restaurants to stay in business during the pandemic. And tell us why you think that happened and how businesses can use social media to make a difference like that.
Well, I think it goes back to what Randa said about engagement, right? This group has allowed the businesses to have direct communication with the end user, the consumers. So within the group, it's a captive audience. People are coming there for food. So if you have a restaurant, a bakery, whatever, it'd be silly not to be in there and not to be interacting with your customers. And so I think, that people, were looking for, different food. They were able to find things that were different. They were able to, I think they were sympathetic to the plight of a lot of these businesses and wanting to support them. The pictures, videos, things like that, are posted in the group are what sell to people. So people can see a picture, and I think that's really what, caused, such engagement within the group. I mean, the amount of, if you saw the stats for the group, you'd be amazed at how much actual engagement there is between, within that group. So I think that's, pretty much what I would say. I think it's just that end user engagement. And then I think, kind of what they can do within the group, right, is they can see what customers want. What are they wanting out there? I think probably everybody at this point, is probably now familiar with coffee flights. Okay, coffee flights didn't exist in Omaha 6 weeks ago, and there's like six different, probably coffee shops that are now offering them. They've been featured on, a couple of different networks. And it all started by one person posting a post in the group asking for somebody to start making these locally. So I think that, people that are willing to listen and want to take that step, I think they can be very, very successful using the data there.
This is kind of awesome. Do you have an example that you can share with one of a business that, maybe wasn't doing super great, was able to, use the Omaha Food Lovers to kind of ramp up their business a little bit?
Yeah, I would say kind of the one I think a lot of people might be aware of is Master's Hand in Tequema. And they've had a couple of interviews on TV where they basically said that without the group, they wouldn't be in business. But people flocked. I think people were, wanting to get out of the house, and, a 40-minute trip from Omaha to Tequema, was something that a lot of people were doing. And so they were selling, I forget how many dozens, it was like 80 dozen cinnamon rolls, or it was almost like 1,000 cinnamon rolls on a Saturday. And they were like, and they were selling out every weekend, and they went from making a couple dozen to like an insane amount. So that was, one place that that comes to mind. Again, there was some other places similar, but that's probably, the one that came to mind to start with. So.
To do that. So, well, we've covered a lot of great information, and, like Randa said, we, could have this go all day and talk about social media and how it affects businesses and how it's used. So I'd like to open it up to you guys. Is there something else that we didn't cover that you think is important for the people on the panel who maybe either work at agencies or they own business, or they're just curious about social media and, kind of what the future is, what the next steps are, or anything like that? Don't all speak at once.
I'll chime in. I think one thing that, we've also learned as an agency over the past year too is the gaming opportunity. Now, it's not necessarily the same as sort of the traditional social platforms like Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, but with platforms like Fortnite and a lot of Twitch and a lot of those live gaming platforms, we've seen a lot of brand integration opportunities. I think it takes maybe someone on your team or someone that if you're not a gamer like myself, getting information there. But I would also encourage, to explore that as kind of a opportunity that's social-ish. It's been super interesting to see that unfold over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I would actually add on to that too. I totally agree, because I remember a stat showing that basically people who support gamers are like way more supportive of advertising on their platform because they want the gamers to be successful, and so they'll do anything, and they'll watch any ad, and they'll buy any product that they're going to push out there. So it's a super new and probably really useful platform for people now to use as influencers. So yeah.
I'd just like to share in terms of changing the subject just a little bit, but still kind of adjacent to the conversation. Over the pandemic, I was very heartened to see that social media did so well. I have a soft spot for social media. I think that there is a tremendous amount of good that can come from social media when used properly and used strategically. And I was so happy to see that a lot of people went to social media to not only help each other in terms of business and commerce and getting support that way, but through the connection of helping each other out too. And so I always really appreciate social for just the interaction and the community that it can build. And I think more brands can take advantage of that through Facebook groups, through some other social media sort of avenues. I would also say what was also interesting about kind of the pandemic and the reaction to that, a lot of brands, particularly small businesses, were caught unaware of the power of marketing. And so they weren't prepared with email addresses. They weren't prepared with other types of promotion. And so social media was really the way in which they could try to communicate to make sure that they could save their business. And in some cases, that kind of was their saving grace. I hope that more brands can really start adopting the power and influence of social media in a very good way.
Totally agree. So if anybody has any questions, Terry or Ann, were there any questions that came through?
We do have a question in the chat. Can you give some advice on your favorite social tools, scheduling, reporting, etc.?
I can jump in on that. Yes, using scheduling tools has honestly helped us so much, especially as we have created these two brands now and we've sort of separated it. So it's been really beneficial to use different platforms. Falcon's a really good one. We can schedule everything across multiple platforms. It's kind of my Bible. I keep it open at all times. I'm constantly moving things around as trends change, things come up, different things we want to promote. So I don't know what I would do without a social scheduling tool. I highly recommend them. Even if you have a very small social team or a very large social team, you can have multiple seats or different logins for the platform. So if anyone needs to come in and see, oh, we have this going out on the 4th of July, they can do that. So definitely recommend using one if you are not already.
Thank you.
Would anyone like to add to that?
I have Falcon is great too. And I think, I think tools are super helpful. And I would encourage, there's kind of a whole spectrum of sort of investment levels as far as tools go. And I get to be the agency person who kind of gets to maybe test all the cool ones. But for small businesses or people who are just starting out, I think there are also within the platforms, I think they're recognizing, Randa, to your point about social good, and the platforms are like, we need to support small business or emerging people, that platforms are building that in. There's also some ones that are free or really low cost that you can just start, because I agree that having some sort of monitoring tool, frankly, is kind of a way to kind of help you help yourself from, things going out too early, too late. So definitely important to consider that as, things ramp up for your campaigns.
Does anyone have any suggestions regarding like the measuring tools? What do you use to measure? How do you decide if a campaign is successful or when you need to change something?
I think that's really dependent on the overall goal of the campaign. There are some schools of thought that really like the vanity matrix of, likes and number of engagements, number of comments. But then sometimes you have kind of a deeper campaign, and that's really more about sales and conversion. Mm-hmm. So depending on the goals of the campaign, you need to make sure that the measurements are completely aligned. We tend to look, or at least, when I do the consulting work, I tend to look at all metrics across the board, look for a variety of trends, and then really take a step back to say, okay, are we measuring for the thing that we wanted to accomplish? Because I think a lot of that can get really muddled in the conversation, and marketers really need to make sure that that measurement is connected back to the goals.
True. Now, Randa, you had mentioned earlier about reading the article about Wendy's CEO, which I also saw that today. Are there any go-to publications regarding social media where you like to go to keep up on the trends, or trying to decide, what's new, what's coming up? Where do I need to do that? Is there specific places to look for that?
Personally, I like to read all things everywhere. There's kind of the tried and true, like the social media Examiner, Social Media Today, some of Adweek, all of the good industry stuff. I think the best way to learn about social media is to really immerse yourself in it, play with it, learn from it, do different campaigns, talk to people in the industry. I just think that blurring the lines between personal and professional is the best way to be a student of the craft.
The questions are starting to roll in. We've got quite a few here. This one is from a nonprofit. Our nonprofit organization is supported by an older generation of donors who are not as familiar with social media. I'd like to start engaging a younger generation of supporters who are passionate about the environment and waste. Do you have any suggestions on how to bridge this gap through social media? Anyone like to take that one on?
I'm a big fan of Facebook, and I struggle saying that a little bit, but if you are looking like at an older crowd, if you're looking at targeting, if you're talking about ease of use of platform, I would start there.
And to add to that, for sure, I think you can have your Instagram and your Facebooks connected, so you can share content across both of them. And I think if you want to hit that younger generation, Instagram is a very user-friendly, great platform you can start with. It's not huge or scary like TikTok or something. So starting with Instagram, starting with Facebook, and using both of those sort of hand in hand, you can share similar content, but making sure you're editing the copy or the photo to more appeal to the different age demographics of each. I would say Instagram and Facebook is a great place to start.
And here's a great one for us. Have any of you dabbled in Clubhouse? And what opportunities do you see for brands with this platform?
Yeah, so I can answer this one. I've explored Clubhouse a lot lately and I love it. So if you haven't tried it yet, you definitely should. But I think there's so many different opportunities for different types of brands. So we've seen lots of like word of mouth marketing happening. So like, for example, somebody at the top of on Dunkin' Donuts, I think it was, basically offered a bunch of donuts in their product, like at the end of their conversations. And they could be talking about, business, and like, it doesn't even have to be about donuts or food or anything like that, but they're meeting with a lot of investors and they're talking to a lot of business owners just to talk about different practices. But at the end of it, promoting your product or promoting what you do is pretty common and it's accepted. And that was a great way for businesses to kind of connect with other owners and other like partnership opportunities. Another example I really like was a humane society went up there. And so, you know how Clubhouse is all audio. And so people don't think that you could really post pictures or anything because you can't actually post it like photos, but they actually did a really cool example of how they took all the profile photos and they uploaded pictures of dogs that were for adoption. And at the end of it, they gave like a little promo, like all the dogs that you see on here, you don't have to pay for, you can just adopt it. And they were all adopted pretty easily. So it was a really cool way to talk about adoption and talk about things like that. But also, be creative with, using photos and things like that to really get, their goals figured out. So Clubhouse is a really creative platform, I think, that basically any brand can use. You just have to be really creative about it.
If I may add on to that, I really love Clubhouse. And if you haven't had a chance, I highly recommend it. It's like taking your soapbox down to the town square and having an opportunity to kind of talk logistics or talk about your business a little bit more. The nice thing about Clubhouse is that it's super trendy. So you're really going to be appealing to a younger audience, but you're also, because it's all audio, you're adding a really big depth to what you're saying. And so it's a great way to start like an actual conversation to humanize your brand and to perhaps give additional details in terms of your industry, what you do, why you do it, and to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. It's just a wonderful way of storytelling and delivering a message in the way that you want to deliver it, and to do it in kind of a more spontaneous way.
Here's another one. I understand when we talk social media, we typically go to the B2C realm. Where do you see B2B social media heading? LinkedIn is the most common platform for B2B, but are there other platforms out there that are seeing more activity from a B2B perspective? And are they supporting more B2B engagement?
I can jump in on that one. What I think is interesting that I'm seeing, and I always feel like B2B sometimes gets the short shift, like it's also, there's so many cool content and storytelling opportunities within B2B. So I want to start off saying that I think it's interesting that a lot of these platforms are kind of pulling different elements from each other. So for example, LinkedIn recently launched a stories type functionality where it's that ephemeral 24-hour kind of very interactive element. So I think, you know, from a B2B perspective, I think it's going back to understanding your audience, researching, you know, what opportunities on the platforms might be relevant. LinkedIn is awesome. It's where people are in the mindset of a business, in the business mindset when they visit that, but maybe even thinking outside the box to show a B2B message where people might not be, your target audience might not be expecting it. Going back to my Excel comment, there's an entire subculture of Excel TikTok where it's like literal Excel enthusiasts are coming together and creating content around hacks and different ways that they use the platform. So I think there's also a listening opportunity, you know, with having that great stalwart in LinkedIn and looking if there's different sub communities within other platforms that might be really beneficial because there just may not be as much saturation of B2B messaging within those platforms.
We're also seeing an increase in Facebook groups that are more B2B related, and maybe not so much like on the sales or conversion side of things, but more in a support community sort of atmosphere. I've been seeing, like, for example, an increase in the healthcare marketing in terms of more nurse groups or more cardiologists kind of joining together to have kind of a sense of community. And so what we're seeing, people coming together in terms of kind of the emotional connection or the connection of kind of sharing the foxhole together. We're all in this, we're all kind of dealing with it. The Facebook groups are growing, but then we're also seeing more people start to share information about like different vendors, different strategic partners. And so there's starting to be more of a sales aspect kind of creeping in, but Facebook groups are really starting to mimic a lot of what's happening on LinkedIn. And what's great about the Facebook groups is that there's less of a professional connection. So there's less pressure to kind of have to have that business side of things. It's a little bit more relaxed.
Okay, we have kind of a two-part question here, and we answered some of it, but not specifically with websites. Are there any websites that you can recommend that offer general information on social media trends, the do's and the don'ts to keep you current? And then this same person asked, I'm also interested in hearing your thoughts about paying to boost posts.
I can answer both of them. And so a website, well, I love to go like on the typical ones, like, you know, Social Media Examiner and Social Media Today. But I think that a really good, like another idea is going on all of the platforms. So like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, actually, they all have like marketing hubs on there. So basically you can go in and look at reports that they do or they hire someone else to do. And that's where I get a lot of my like stats that I use in presentations and things like that. Because they'll just update it like once a month or something with a different kind of study, like, oh, what were the most used hashtags on Twitter and why does that matter to you? And so I love using the ones that are directly on the platform, and then also going to the different scheduling platforms like Sprout, Hootsuite, Falcon, any of those. They all also have reports. And I'm a really report heavy person. So I love seeing the numbers and the infographics, and they just give a ton of different studies that they were running throughout the month. So I would check back every month because they usually update it, at least on one of the platforms. And so you'll always be getting new information. And then for paying to boost posts, I think that if you have the budget, it's a really good idea to, you know, get more engagement. But I think it's especially good for your like any brand that's selling something, especially because you can always set your goal to, you know, go directly to a website or to buy something. And I think that's when I found it most helpful. Not only just to get engagement, but to actually get sales and to be able to track to see where your social media is leading them to. So it's a really great way to, you know, track your goals, and especially if, you know, the goal is, you know, for more business oriented and reaching a certain amount of sales. So I love boosting posts, but it definitely needs to be strategic in which ones to boost, because you can't boost one that's more like factual or maybe like an infographic if you're trying to get sales. You'd be more likely to boost one that was more about the product that you're selling. It's a little bit smarter that way to do it. So there's definitely a way to maximize on the money that you're using, but there's definitely the other way where you can really waste your money on boosting. So you have to be really strategic about your plan.
Would anyone else like to add to any of those comments? I think that wraps our questions. Daryl?
Yep, I'm on. Ginny, Brianna, Christy, Randa, Stacy, Abbie, thank you for taking the time to join us today and for sharing your insights, your thought leadership, and the information you've provided is going to give us all really great insight to walk away with. Thanks again for all of you for joining. I'm Daryl Anderson, Creative Director for Clark Creative Group and AAF Omaha's current president. I'd like to announce 2 member perk gift cards awards today that are going to go out to our members, Cassie Warren from KTV and Diana Kaluza from Summit Media. Congratulations, ladies. Your gift cards will be sent to you. Jenny mentioned earlier in July, I'm excited to announce AAF Omaha and AAF Lincoln is becoming AAF Nebraska so that we can venture out across our states to all 4 corners. Our board of directors has been selected and approved to move the change of our name, and membership voted on the change this month. Soon after AA's annual meeting in July, when we officially become AAF Nebraska, we'll also be voting on our board for 21-22. The election ballot for approval was sent out to members. Please take a few minutes to go through and approve that slate nomination of our directors so we can get them in place. If you have any interest in working on the AAF committees, please reach out to us through the website and let us know. Thank you to our elite sponsors, Centro and Woodman Life, for their generosity to our club through the year. Thank you to our website team, Envoy. Very excited about the new AAF Nebraska website, which will be launching in July. Very clean, very informative. And just a couple of events coming up. Happy to have On Brand back this year in July, July 15th. It is a virtual event this year. You should have gotten your member discount code. I think mine actually came to me today. The event is hosted by AMA, PRSA, AIGA, and of course, AAF Omaha and Lincoln, a great partnership. More information for that is on our website and events, which I'm putting in links right now. July 22nd is our Omaha webinar and our annual meeting featuring keynote speaker Kathleen Reason. It's an 8:30 a.m. meeting. Kathleen is fantastic speaker, and her thought leadership is going to focus on vision, diversification, and a 4-step awareness process to propel you in your profession. I also want to take a quick time to just mention our AAF talent directory form that can be found on our website, as well as long as our new DE&I resources that we've been adding regularly. We've created this talent directory focused on minority creatives and marketers in the region. We believe this tool will help increase the referral and hiring pools for various companies who hire an incredible amount of full-time personnel and freelancers locally. And I think Ann's going to post that in the chat for us as well. Once again, thank you all panelists for joining us. Thank you to all of our attendees for joining us. Once again, please hit aafomaha.org to always check out to see what we're bringing to you next. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.